The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled with the light of 3 suns. 200 representatives from the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy sat in rising tiers of polished seats, their voices mixing in a constant murmur of different languages and electronic translations. Commander Jack Reed sat quietly in his seat, maintaining a neutral expression as the Council discussed humanity's petition to join their ranks. His simple blue uniform stood out among the elaborate robes and biomechanical suits worn by the alien representatives. He had expected some resistance, but the open mockery surprised even him. These humans still use chemical rockets for their planetary launches, High Counselor Voss announced, his silver skin reflecting rainbow patterns as he gestured at the holographic display. Their most advanced ships rely on fusion drives, technology we abandoned centuries ago. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of amusement in his species. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Reed noticed how different each species' laughter sounded, some like bells, others like grinding gears or whistling wind. They all shared the same meaning, though: dismissal. And their weapons, another representative called out. They still used projectiles. Actual physical projectiles. This brought another wave of laughter, like throwing rocks at each other. Reed gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles whitening slightly. He had spent 15 years in Earth's Space Force before joining the diplomatic corps. He had seen those primitive weapons in action. But he kept silent, remembering his orders. "Let them underestimate us," the Admiral had said. "It's worked in our favor before." High Counselor Voss raised a hand, bringing the chamber to order. The human civilization has achieved faster than light travel, qualifying them for consideration. However, their technological level is concerning. He pulled up more images: Earth's cities, military bases, orbital stations. They still wage war among themselves. Their cities are unshielded. Their ships lack even basic quantum architecture. "If I may speak, High Counselor." Reed's voice carried clearly through the chamber, translated into 200 languages simultaneously. He stood, his movement drawing all eyes to him. "The human representative may address the Council," Voss said, his tone carrying the same indulgence one might use with a child. "Humanity has developed along a different path than many civilizations here," Reed began. "We value practical solutions over theoretical elegance. Yes, we still use projectile weapons, because they work. Yes, we still have fusion drives, because they're reliable. And yes, we still wage war, because we understand that conflict is sometimes unavoidable." A low murmur spread through the chamber, but Reed continued. "We don't ask to join the Council because we claim to be the most advanced civilization. We ask to join because we believe we have something to contribute. Different perspectives, different solutions, different ways of thinking. And what exactly could your primitive approaches contribute to a galaxy that has moved beyond such basic methods?" Voss asked, triggering another round of chuckles. Reed smiled slightly. "Sometimes the old ways work best. Sometimes being advanced means you overthink simple problems. And sometimes," he paused, looking around the chamber, "sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you laugh at." The chamber erupted in laughter again, louder this time. Representatives pointed at him, their translator units struggling to keep up with all the different forms of mockery being expressed. High Counselor Voss raised his hands, his skin patterns shifting to display amusement. "Thank you, Commander Reed, for that entertaining perspective," Voss said. "The Council will consider Earth's petition. Though I must say, your presence here has certainly provided us with memorable entertainment." Reed sat down, maintaining his slight smile. Let them laugh, he thought. He had seen Earth's classified military reports. He knew it was coming from the outer rim of known space. He knew why Earth had pushed for Council membership now, after decades of watching and waiting. They would understand soon enough. And then, Reed suspected, no one would be laughing. The emergency alert cut through the Council station's normal hum of activity. Red lights flashed across the crystal dome, casting strange shadows through the chamber. The laughter from the previous day's session died instantly as urgent messages flooded every communication channel. Reed watched from his small office as council members rushed through the corridors. Their earlier composure had vanished, replaced by barely contained panic. His communication unit buzzed. Another message from Earth Command. He read it quickly, his expression growing grimmer with each line. 3 colonies on the outer rim had gone silent. Not just silent, destroyed. The few scattered distress signals painted a horrifying picture. Something had emerged from deep space, something that moved faster than any known ship, and left only debris in its wake. The council chamber filled again. But this time there was no mockery, no laughter. High Counselor Voss stood at the center, his silver skin now a dull gray of concern. The holographic displays showed the devastation. Entire worlds reduced to rubble, defense fleets scattered like broken toys. The attack pattern is unlike anything we've encountered, one of the military advisors reported. Her crystalline form sparkled as she manipulated the display. They bypass our shield technology completely. Our most advanced weapons barely scratch their hulls. Reed's hand moved to his communicator. Earth needed to know this. But before he could send his report, High Counselor Voss spoke. "We have received another transmission," Voss announced, his voice heavy. "The 4th colony in the Nexus sector has fallen. But this time, we have visual data." The hologram shifted, showing massive ships of an impossible design. They seemed to flow like liquid metal, changing shape as they moved. Energy weapons from the colony's defenders passed right through them, as if they weren't even there. "The defending fleet managed to destroy one," the advisor continued. "It took their entire arsenal. And the cost." She paused, her crystalline structure dimming. "The cost was their entire fleet." Reed stood up from his observer's seat. "High Counselor, Earth has experience with asymmetric warfare. We might be able to." "This is not the time for primitive solutions, Commander." Voss cut him off, though with less contempt than before. "This threat requires our most advanced technology. We will deploy the combined fleet." The combined fleet. Reed had read about it, the pride of the Council's military might. Ships powered by artificial quantum singularities, weapons that could reshape reality itself. All of it useless, he suspected, against an enemy that could simply ignore such advanced technology. "The 5th colony has gone dark," someone announced. The room fell silent. That colony had been less than a day's travel from the Council's core worlds. Reed's communicator buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Earth Command. It was an automated alert he'd set up weeks ago, tracking unusual energy signatures in Council space. The pattern matched exactly what his scientists had predicted. He looked up at the panicking Council members and felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. "High Counselor," Reed tried again. "At least let us share our tactical analysis. We've been studying unusual energy signatures in this region for months. We might have insights." "Months." Voss turned all 4 eyes on him. "You knew this was coming." "We suspected something was coming. It's why we pushed for Council membership now. We wanted to warn you, to help prepare." Another alert cut through the chamber. A 6th colony gone. The hostile fleet was moving faster now, learning, adapting. The Council representatives began arguing among themselves, their carefully maintained dignity crumbling in the face of a threat their advanced technology couldn't handle. Reed stepped back and sent his report to Earth Command. One word. Confirmed. They had hoped they were wrong about the pattern, wrong about what was coming. But humanity had seen this before, in their own wars. The signs of an enemy probe, testing defenses, learning weaknesses, preparing for the main invasion. The Council's mighty combined fleet was already moving to engage the threat. Reed knew they would fail. And when they did, perhaps then they would be ready to listen to some primitive solutions. The combined fleet's destruction happened faster than anyone expected. Reed watched the feed with the rest of the Council as their mighty warships, pride of a dozen advanced civilizations, broke apart like glass sculptures in a storm. The enemy revealed itself at last, not ships, but massive living machines that moved like a swarm of insects through space. The swarm, the military analysts called them. The name stuck. They weren't just ships or weapons. They were an entire ecosystem of biomechanical horrors, some as small as fighter craft, others larger than space stations. All of them connected, learning, evolving with each battle. Reed stood in the Council's war room, now stripped of its former grandeur. The ornate decorations had been replaced by tactical displays, showing a wave of red spreading across their space. The swarm devoured everything in its path. Ships, stations, even entire planets stripped down to feed their endless hunger for materials. "Our quantum disruptors do nothing," one of the Council's admirals reported, his holographic form flickering with interference. "They adapt to each weapon we use, even our reality warping technology." The transmission cut off. Another world lost. High Counselor Voss looked older now, his silver skin dulled to almost gray. "How?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "How can they ignore our most advanced shields? Our weapons pass right through them." "Because they're not trying to block your weapons," Reed spoke up. "They're shifting slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. It's an old trick, just on a scale we've never seen before." The room turned to look at him. For once, no one laughed. "Explain," Voss demanded. "Your weapons and shields are too perfect, too advanced," Reed said. "You're trying to affect something that isn't fully there when you fire. But physical weapons, simple kinetic impacts, they can't ignore those. The laws of physics still apply when they phase back to attack." A new alert flashed across the screens. The swarm had reached the Council's inner defense line. Ships that cost the equivalent of entire planetary economies to build lasted mere seconds against the onslaught. The swarm wasn't just winning. It was consuming their technology, growing stronger with each victory. "3 more worlds have gone dark," an aide reported. "The evacuation fleets, they didn't make it out." Reed's communicator buzzed. Earth Command's message was brief. "Fleet position confirmed. Awaiting your signal." He looked around the room at the Council representatives, the most advanced species in known space, now watching helplessly as their civilization crumbled. Their technology, their achievements, their pride. None of it mattered against an enemy that had found the perfect counter to their methods. "We can help," Reed said quietly. "Earth's fleet is ready. We've been preparing since we first detected the swarm's probe signals months ago." "Your primitive ships," someone scoffed, but the sound held more desperation than mockery now. "What can they do against this?" "Sometimes the old ways work best," Reed replied, echoing his words from days ago. "Sometimes being too advanced means you forget the basics. The swarm adapts to energy weapons, complex shield frequencies, quantum states. But you can't adapt to 100 tons of metal moving at relativistic speeds. You can't phase out of reality fast enough to dodge a spread of kinetic kill vehicles." Another world gone. The tactical display showed the swarm moving faster now, growing bolder. They had learned all they needed to about the Council's defenses. Nothing could stop them. Nothing advanced anyway. "High Counselor," Reed said, standing straighter. "Earth requests permission to assist in the defense of Council space. Our fleet is positioned and ready. But we need your authorization to enter Council territory with an armed force." Voss stared at the tactical display. His mighty civilization, built on the most advanced science in known space, was falling apart. And now his only hope lay with the primitives they had laughed at just days ago. "The Council," Voss began, then stopped as another alert showed a swarm fleet approaching the core worlds. He turned all 4 eyes to Reed. "The Council accepts Earth's assistance." Reed nodded and sent the signal. It was time to show the galaxy why humans had kept their primitive weapons, and why no one should ever mistake simple for weak. The Council's war room had changed in the hours since Reed sent his signal. The ornate displays now showed tactical readouts in the simple, practical format used by Earth's military. Council technicians worked alongside human specialists who had arrived through emergency jump points, their dated-looking computers tied into the Council's quantum networks. The swarm's main fleet will reach the core systems in 6 hours, Reed explained, pointing to a holographic display that showed enemy movements in red. They think they've won. They think they know all our capabilities. He smiled slightly. They don't. High Counselor Voss watched the humans work with a mixture of confusion and desperate hope. Their methods seemed backwards. Physical keyboards instead of neural interfaces, radar instead of quantum scanning, actual paper mats spread out on tables. But they moved with the confidence of people who had fought wars before. Real wars, not the controlled conflicts the Council had experienced in its golden age. Your fleet, Voss said, trying to keep the doubt from his voice. How many ships? 300 combat vessels, Reed replied, plus support craft. A gasp went through the room. The Council had lost over 10,000 ships already. 300 seemed like nothing. That's all? Someone asked. That's all we need, Reed said. He turned to his tactical team. Show them. The main display changed, showing a detailed analysis of swarm behavior, simple graphs, basic physics equations, and combat footage played across the screen. The swarm uses a phase shift technology to avoid energy weapons, a human analyst explained, but they can only stay out of phase for 3.2 seconds before they have to revert. Their patterns are predictable if you know what to look for. And this helps us how? Voss asked. Because Reed said, we don't use energy weapons. We use mass drivers, railguns, kinetic kill vehicles, good old-fashioned missiles with some new tricks. Things that work in multiple phases of spacetime, things they can't adapt to without breaking the laws of physics. The display showed a simulation of human weapons against swarm ships. Simple projectiles, moving at speeds that made them nearly invisible to the naked eye. The swarm could phase out to dodge some, but not all. Not when there were thousands of projectiles coming from dozens of different angles. But the numbers, Voss protested. Even if your weapons work, you're outnumbered 100 to 1. Numbers don't matter if you control the space they have to fight in, Reed replied. He nodded to another analyst who brought up a new display. We've been mapping their movement patterns. They're aggressive, overconfident. They'll chase what they think is weak prey. We can use that. The room watched as human officers laid out their battle plan. It was nothing like the Council's elegant strategies. This was brutal, efficient, and clever in ways that made several Council members uncomfortable. The humans hadn't just studied the enemy. They understood it in ways the Council's advanced analytics had missed. You've done this before, Voss realized, looking at Reed with new understanding. Not against the swarm, but you fought wars like this. Reed nodded. Humanity spent centuries fighting itself before we reached the stars. We learned things, important things, like how to think like an enemy, how to use their strength against them, how to win when you're outnumbered. A signal chimed. The swarm had destroyed another outer colony. They were getting closer. Time to deploy, Reed announced. The human officers moved with practiced efficiency, sending coordinates and battle plans to their fleet. High Counselor, we need the Council fleet to fall back to these positions. All of them. Fall back. But that leaves the core worlds exposed. No, Reed said, his eyes on the tactical display. It leaves them apparently exposed. The swarm thinks they've won. They think they know what we can do. Let's show them how wrong they are. The humans worked quickly, their primitive-looking equipment interfacing with Council systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible. They weren't elegant or advanced, but they were thorough. Prepared. Ready. Signal the fleet, Reed ordered. Operation Thunderstrike is go. He turned to Voss. Time to show you why Earth still teaches its soldiers about ancient battles. Some lessons never go out of date. The war room hummed with activity as humanity prepared to demonstrate why being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. The Council Station's sensors detected the human fleet's arrival before anyone saw them. There was no elegant quantum tunneling, no reality-bending jump drive effects, just a massive burst of gravitational waves as 300 ships tore their way back into normal space, fusion drives burning like newborn stars. At their head flew the EFS Thunderchild, humanity's most advanced warship. To the Council observers, it looked crude. A massive cylinder bristling with radio antennae, radar arrays, and what looked like oversized gun barrels. No sleek lines, no aesthetic beauty, just brutal functionality. "What are those structures along their hulls?" Voss asked, watching the tactical display as the human fleet moved into position. "Rail gun batteries," Reed replied. "Missile pods. Point defense systems. What you called primitive weapons yesterday." He checked his datapad. "The swarm fleet will enter the system in 5 minutes. Right where we predicted." The human ships spread out in a formation that made no sense to the Council tacticians. They seemed to be leaving gaps, weaknesses in their lines. Several Council members began to protest, but Reed held up his hand. "Watch," he said. The swarm arrived exactly as predicted, their biomechanical ships sliding into reality like oil spreading across water. They moved to surround what they thought was an inferior force, falling perfectly into the pattern the humans had anticipated. "Now," Reed ordered. The Thunderchild fired first, not energy beams or quantum torpedoes, but solid metal slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds. The swarm ships tried to phase shift, but the humans had timed it perfectly. As the enemy shifted partially out of normal space, the rams caught them between phases. 3 swarm ships simply ceased to exist, torn apart by basic physics applied with devastating precision. "Secondary batteries, fire at will," the order went out. The space around the human fleet erupted with weapons fire, not the elegant streams of energy the Council used, but walls of hypervelocity projectiles and missiles. The swarm tried to adapt, tried to phase shift, but the humans had studied their patterns too well. For every shot they dodged, 3 more caught them. "Impossible," one of the Council admirals whispered. "They're using targeting algorithms that predict where they'll be when they phase back," Reed finished. "Like I said, some old lessons never go out of date. We learned how to lead our targets a long time ago." The swarm's response was devastating. They launched a counterattack that would have annihilated a Council fleet. But the human ships were already moving, their seemingly random formation revealing itself as a carefully planned trap. The gaps in their lines became killing grounds, crossfire zones where simple kinetic weapons proved that the laws of physics were the deadliest force in the universe. The Thunderchild took a direct hit, its hull scarred by the swarm's energy weapons. But where Council ships would have shattered, the human vessel's thick armor held. No elegant shields, just meters of composite materials designed to take punishment. "All ships, execute pattern Delta," Reed commanded. "Show them why we still study submarine warfare." The human fleet moved like predators now, using the 3-dimensional space of the battlefield in ways the swarm hadn't expected. They didn't try to match the enemy's advanced technology. They simply made it irrelevant through superior tactics and the application of basic physical principles. "They're actually winning," Voss said in disbelief, watching as more swarm ships died under the human assault. "With weapons we considered obsolete centuries ago. We never stopped improving these weapons," Reed explained. "We just did it quietly. Sometimes the best advances don't look like advances at all." The Thunderchild led another attack run, its massive rail guns speaking in silent fury. The swarm tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. They couldn't evolve past the simple fact that mass times acceleration equals force, and the humans had mastered that equation centuries ago. "Signal from the swarm fleet," an operator announced. They're retreating." Reed nodded, unsurprised. "They've finally met something they can't adapt to. human determination, and good old-fashioned physics. He turned to Voss. Should we pursue? The High Counselor looked at the human ships, still fighting with mechanical precision, still proving that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. Yes, he said. And I believe the Council owes humanity an apology. The pursuit of the swarm turned into the largest space battle in Council history. Reed stood on the Thunderchild's bridge, now reinforced with Council observers watching in amazement as human battle tactics unfolded across the star system. The deck hummed beneath their feet as the massive rail guns cycled for another salvo. Multiple swarm signatures detected, the sensor officer reported. They're trying to regroup at the gas giant's L4 point. Looks like they're calling in reinforcements. Reed nodded, exactly as he'd expected. The swarm fought like insects. When threatened, they gathered into larger groups. Predictable. Exploitable. Launch the mines, he ordered. Across the human fleet, ships released what looked like simple metal spheres into space. The Council observers watched in confusion as these primitive devices drifted into carefully calculated positions. Mines, Voss asked from his position on the bridge. In space combat. Smart mines, Reed corrected, with a few surprises inside. Watch. The swarm fleet emerged from their phase shift, gathering into a massive battle formation that would have terrified any Council admiral. Thousands of biomechanical ships, each one adapted to resist the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. The mines activated. Simple nuclear devices detonated in precisely calculated patterns, not to destroy but to create overlapping fields of electromagnetic pulse and radiation. The swarm ships' phase shift abilities stuttered and failed as basic physics overwhelmed their advanced systems. All ships, execute attack pattern Sigma, Reed commanded. Time to show them why humanity never abandoned projectile weapons. The human fleet moved like a well-oiled machine. Centuries of war games, simulations, and hard-learned lessons showed in every maneuver. Ships rolled and pivoted, bringing their broadside guns to bear in synchronized volleys. Space itself seemed to blur as thousands of hypervelocity rounds crossed the battlefield. The swarm tried to adapt, tried to phase shift away from the attack. But the humans had turned space itself into a weapon. Every escape route led into another kill zone. Every evasive maneuver met with precisely calculated firing solutions. Multiple hits on our port side, the damage control officer reported as the Thunderchild shook. Armor holding. They're trying to copy our weapons now. Reed smiled grimly. Let them try. You can't copy experience. The swarm's attempts to replicate human weapons failed spectacularly. They could manufacture railguns, but they couldn't match the decades of research that had gone into perfecting them. They couldn't replicate the countless small improvements, the countless lessons learned through trial and error. Enemy fleet is breaking formation, Tactical announced. They're running. But Reed knew better. No, they're not. All ships brace for impact. They're about to try their last trick. The swarm ships suddenly merged together, combining into a massive structure that dwarfed anything in the battlefield. A last-ditch effort, using all their advanced technology in one desperate gamble. Focus all fire on these coordinates, Reed ordered, marking points on the tactical display. Not the obvious weak spots. Those would be traps. But seemingly random locations across the megastructure's hull. The human fleet fired as one. Thousands of hypervelocity rounds struck precisely calculated points, each impact triggering a cascade of structural failures. The swarm's combined form began to break apart, their very adaptability turned against them as systems tried to phase shift in different directions at once. Final salvo, Reed commanded. All ships, fire everything we have. The Thunderchild's guns roared one last time, joined by every weapon in the human fleet. Space itself seemed to warp under the barrage of kinetic energy. The swarm megastructure shuddered, tried to adapt one final time, and then simply came apart. Enemy structure destroyed, Tactical reported. Picking up escape pods. No correction. Those are their core units trying to flee. Launch the interceptors. Reed ordered. Don't let a single one escape. We end this here. Voss watched in awe as human fighters chased down the last remnants of the swarm. Your people, he said quietly. You planned for this. All of it. We planned for everything, Reed replied. Because sometimes the greatest weapon isn't technology. It's knowing how to use it. The battle was ending, but its lesson would echo through the galaxy forever. Never mistake simplicity for weakness, and never laugh at those who remember the old ways of war. 2 weeks after the final battle, the council chamber looked very different. Gone were the elaborate decorations and displays of advanced technology. Instead, simple holographic screens showed the ongoing recovery efforts across council space, and at the center of it all stood a human-designed tactical command station. Reed walked into the chamber wearing his dress uniform. No longer the lone human in a sea of alien faces, Earth officers worked alongside council specialists, teaching them the combat doctrines and strategic thinking that had saved their civilization. The chamber no longer echoed with mocking laughter, but with the serious discussions of species learning to work together. Commander Reed, High Counselor Voss called out, his silver skin now bearing the subtle patterns of humility. The council is ready to begin. The chamber filled with representatives from every surviving council world. Many attended via hologram, their home systems still rebuilding from the swarm's devastation. But all eyes, real and virtual, focused on the human commander. The final report from the cleanup operation. Reed began, bringing up a tactical display. The last swarm remnants have been eliminated. Our teams found their nesting grounds in the galactic arm they emerged from. We've established a quarantine zone and early warning network. Using human sensor technology, Voss added, a note of respect in his voice. Simple radio waves and gravitational detectors. Sometimes, the old ways are the best ways. Reed nodded. We've begun sharing our military knowledge with council forces, basic combat tactics, weapon designs, strategic thinking. But more importantly, we're teaching the philosophy behind it all. Philosophy? Asked one of the council members. What philosophy is there in such primitive weapons? The philosophy of practical solutions, Reed explained. Of never assuming that newer always means better. Of remembering that the simplest answer is often the right one. He gestured to the tactical display. The swarm adapted to your advanced technology because it was predictable. They couldn't adapt to us because we never stopped adapting ourselves. The display showed human ships working alongside council vessels, teaching them new ways to fight. Rail guns were being installed on advanced alien hulls. Simple but effective armor plates replaced complex shield generators. The council was learning, evolving in its own way. The human fleet suffered losses too, Voss announced to the chamber. 17 ships destroyed, 42 damaged. Yet they never hesitated, never retreated. They saved our civilization with weapons we mocked, tactics we dismissed, and courage we have forgotten we needed. Reed watched as the council members nodded in agreement. The same beings who had laughed at humanity's primitive technology now looked to Earth for guidance. But there was no pride in their defeat, no arrogance in humanity's victory, only understanding. We have much to learn from each other, Reed said. Your advanced science combined with our practical experience. Your technology merged with our tactical knowledge. Together, we can be stronger than either of us alone. The council has voted, Voss declared. Earth is hereby granted full membership, with a permanent seat on the Military Advisory Board. Furthermore, he paused, his skin patterns showing deep respect. We request that Earth take the lead in establishing a new combined defense force, one that balances advanced technology with proven methods. Reed smiled. Earth accepts with one condition. Name it. That we never forget this lesson, that we remember that strength comes in many forms, and that mockery and dismissal are the first steps toward defeat. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then Voss did something unprecedented. He stepped down from his elevated position and walked to stand face to face with Reed. "On behalf of the Council, I formally apologize for our arrogance," he said. "We laughed at your weapons. We mocked your methods. We dismissed your warnings. And in doing so, we nearly lost everything. That will never happen again." Reed extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Voss took it. The chamber erupted in applause, not the mocking laughter of before, but the genuine appreciation of peoples united in understanding. Humanity had proved its worth not through advanced technology, but through the eternal virtues of preparation, determination, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be.